Welcome to Aktiespararna and Digitala Aktiekvällen. I will now switch to English and I will welcome you, Trista Morrison from Saniona, to this event. My name is Lars Håkansson and I will be your moderator. So we look forward for to your presentation, Trista. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Lars. I'll go ahead and pull up my slides now. Excellent. All right, well, we'll get started then. So thank you so much for having us today to present about Saniona. We are a rare disease company and we are seeking to improve the lives of patients who are suffering from rare diseases through scientific innovation. I'm Trista Morrison. I'm the Chief Communications Officer, and it's a pleasure to be able to tell you more about Saniona today. To begin with, I will be making forward-looking statements today, so just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. I want to start out by talking a little bit about what a rare disease company is. What does that mean? Some folks who are listening may be very familiar with this terminology already, especially if you're very familiar with the biopharmaceutical industry. But for those who are not, I just want to take a step back and start by saying, what is a rare disease? So a rare disease is in the US, it is defined as a disease that impacts less than 200,000 patients. And in the EU, it's less than 5 in 10,000 people. So these are rare diseases. However, there are many of them out there. There have been more than 7,000 rare diseases identified, and less than 10% of them have treatments available. So many people who are suffering with these rare diseases do not have treatments. And unfortunately, about half of those impacted with rare diseases are children. So it really speaks to the significant unmet need to make medicines that can address rare diseases. In addition to that, there are incentives for companies to focus on rare diseases. A question that I sometimes get is, well, if it's a smaller amount of patients, why would you want to invest in bringing a drug to the market? So the reason for that is because there are these incentives that may include smaller or faster clinical trials, tax credits, market exclusivity. There's a number of things here that are designed to make it attractive for companies to make medicines for rare diseases, because there's such an unmet need here. So in the United States with the FDA, we have orphan drug designation, and we at Saniona have secured orphan drug designation for our lead product, Testament, in our 2 lead indications, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. So I also want to just note on this slide before we move on, developing medicines for rare diseases is a proven business model. There are a number of biopharmaceutical companies, and I've pointed out some of them here on the bottom of the screen, but there are a number of biopharmaceutical companies who have made very successful businesses out of developing medicines specifically to treat rare diseases. And I'll also note that a number of the management team members at Saniona, we've worked at some of these companies like Genzyme, like Sobi, like others. And so we bring this experience in building a company that is bringing multiple medicines to market to treat multiple diseases. We bring that experience to Saniona. So I want to tell you a little bit about the specific rare diseases that we're focusing on at Saniona with our lead medicine, which is called Testament. So the first rare disease I want to tell you about is called hypothalamic obesity. Hypothalamic obesity usually occurs from an injury to a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. Oftentimes, this is because there's a brain tumor that is sitting in that area. And when these patients have that brain tumor removed, it damages the hypothalamus, and that causes hypothalamic obesity. Now, hypothalamic obesity, the symptoms, it's characterized by rapid weight gain, significant weight gain, and hyperphagia, which is an uncontrollable hunger. And to help you understand what these patients and their families are going through. I have some pictures here that some of the families in the HO community were kind enough to allow me to share. So you can see here, Allie, this is her on her first day of preschool and then on her first day of pre-K. So the pictures were taken a year apart. One was before her diagnosis and one was after she had had her brain tumor removed and had developed hypothalamic obesity. So you can really see there, just even in her face, how her body composition has changed. And then I have another example here, Silas. His mother was kind enough to provide a before and after picture as well. And you can just really quickly see the difference in body composition and weight gain here. And Silas's mom, Chelsea, also provided us with a quote. She said, we have to start locking cabinets, locking our fridge, restricting food, because if he got his hands on it, he wouldn't stop eating it. And that's the hyperphagia, this uncontrollable hunger that just drives these patients to eat, even if they've just had a meal. They don't feel full, they're still hungry. So it's a very difficult disease, not only for the patients, but also for the caregivers. This disease impacts up to 25,000 people in the US, 40,000 in Europe, and there are no FDA-approved therapies for hypothalamic obesity. In fact, there's been very little research even in this field. Saniona has been one of the pioneers in this field, and we were the first company to ever get orphan drug designation from the FDA for a medicine to treat hypothalamic obesity. Moving on to Prader-Willi syndrome. So Prader-Willi syndrome is a genetic disease. So these patients are born with Prader-Willi syndrome. However, you see an overlap here with the symptomology, the way that the disease manifests, right? Again, you see significant weight gain and you see the hyperphagia, you see the uncontrollable hunger. We have a quote from 11-year-old William here. He said, "It really affects me a lot. I can't really control my hunger. And it's just really hard for me to just not eat every single second." The hyperphagia really defines this disease. These patients are always hungry. We have some photos here, and I'll note John, Eric, and Erin, who live in a home for adults with PWS. That is often the course that this disease takes. Because of the extreme hyperphagia, these PWS patients are often not able to live independently. It's very difficult for them to work because, if you think about work options, well, certainly they couldn't work in a restaurant, but even in an office environment, think about how many times there's, birthday cake in the kitchen. It's very difficult for them to work in environments where there is food around, and it's very difficult for them to live independently. They often need to live in a home for people with PWS where all of the food is kept locked up. And not only the refrigerators and the cabinets, but the trash cans. I mean, these folks will go through the trash to find food to eat. They will steal food. So often it's a very difficult disease, both for the patients and for the people who are trying to care for them. We believe it's slightly more common than HO, up to 34,000 in the US and 50,000 in Europe. And there are no FDA-approved therapies to address that hyperphagia. There is a growth hormone that these patients usually take, and that can help with the body composition, but it doesn't address the hyperphagia. And that's really what caregivers tell us is the most significant aspect, bothersome aspect of this disease that they need to see addressed. So let me tell you what we're doing about it at Saniona. So we're advancing our lead product, which is called Tesamet, for both hypothalamic obesity and Prader-Willi syndrome. So Tesamet is a medicine that was discovered in the labs of our own scientists, of Saniona's scientists. It's a potentially first-in-class medicine, and it has never been approved before. It is currently in clinical trials. So the way it works is it's a capsule, and it's designed to work in both the reward center and the appetite center of the brain. It's designed to increase levels of 3 hormones, dopamine, serotonin, and noradrenaline, which is intended to reduce that craving for food, reduce the appetite, and increase the metabolic fat burn. That's the mechanism of action. Let me show you some of the data that we have to date. So this is the data from our initial phase 2 trial in hypothalamic obesity. So I'm going to note here, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor on the screen, but this was a small trial, right? The ends, the number of patients are very small. The point of this trial was to see if we could get proof of concept, to see if we could get evidence that this might actually work. And this is what we saw here, right? You can see this is weight at the beginning, the lines start together. And then you see the placebo patients, they decrease a little at the beginning, and that's because they're in a clinical trial and they're also getting counseling on diet and exercise and other support. But it's very difficult to keep that weight down, right? You can see here, it rebounds right back up. Now, the patients who are receiving Tesamet, which is the blue line, you can see how their weight declines all the way down. And that here at the end of the double-blind period, what we saw was a statistically significant 6.28% decrease in body weight. And that is also significant in the eyes of the FDA. The FDA has issued a guidance document for developing weight loss drugs and specifically for phase 3 trials of those drugs. And they view a 5% decrease as meaningful. And so this was a 6.28. It was greater than that. Then what happened here at the dotted line was this was the end of the double blind period. And all the patients who were getting placebo, they now were switched to Tesamet. And then you can see here how suddenly the weight starts to drop off. And you can see the weight here in the group who continued to receive Tesamet stayed relatively low. I'll note the most common adverse events were sleep disorder, dizziness, dry mouth, headache, and there were no significant or meaningful differences in heart rate or blood pressure. So this was the initial phase 2 trial. This was the trial that was designed to say, is there enough evidence for us to move this forward into a bigger trial, which would require a larger investment? And based on this data, we decided yes. And so now we are currently conducting a phase 2B clinical trial of Tesamet in hypothalamic obesity. So note, this is, we're intending to enroll about 110 patients in this trial. So that is significantly bigger than the initial trial that we conducted. Now, this is still a rare disease. So, you know, if we were trying to study a medicine for a very common disease like diabetes or heart disease, we would probably have to enroll thousands of patients. So that's why we're focusing on rare diseases, because 110 patients, it's a lot. It should generate robust data, but it's not thousands. And so it's something that a company of our size, which is still relatively small, believes that we can achieve. So again, this is a site, we have sites planned internationally, including in the US. This trial is being conducted under a US IND, but also at a number of sites across Europe and in many other countries as well. The primary change here is going to be the change in body weight, reducing body weight. And you can see here, we expect our top line data in the second half of 2023. Now I want to show you the data from our initial phase 2 trial in PWS. Again, you can see these ends here. These are small numbers. This was an initial trial designed to see, is it worth moving this forward and investing in a larger trial? And what we saw here, you can see a nice separation with the weight reduction here, where the placebo line is going up a bit and the Tesamet line is coming down nicely. Again, this is not statistically significant because it's a very small number, but we did see still greater than that 5% mark that the FDA likes to see. And then when it came to hyperphagia, we did actually see an 8.1 point decrease on the hyperphagia scale, and that was very, very significant. So again, looking at these initial results, we decided it is worth moving into a phase 2B trial, and that is what we are doing right now. We are also simultaneously conducting a large phase 2B clinical trial of Tesamet in Prader-Willi syndrome. Again, this is going to be about 120 patients. We have sites planned internationally across the US, across the EU, and in a number of other countries. And here, the primary endpoint is going to be hyperphagia. And so that has a slightly different study design. We believe we'll be able to get the data a bit sooner. We anticipate top-line data in the first half of 2023. So that's Testament, and that is our lead program. But now I want to talk to you about one of the things that I think makes Saniona really special, which is that we are more than our lead program. A lot of biotech companies out there today, they might have one lead program that's a bit advanced, or they might have a really interesting technology platform that's very early, but you don't often see both in the same company. And that is one of the reasons why I was excited to come to Saniona, and many of us on the management team were excited. So in addition to Testament, Saniona also has a very robust drug discovery engine. It's focused on ion channels. Ion channels are an important target in the body. They move ions like sodium in and out of cells. They're involved in a number of bodily functions. And in fact, they're quite proven because the current market for ion channel modulating drugs, a number of successful ion channel drugs have been brought to market, and it's more than $11 billion industry. And yet, only 20% of all the ion channels out there have been turned into commercially available therapeutics. So we know ion channels can be made into drugs. We know those drugs can be very successful. And yet there's still 80% of them that haven't been tapped. And the reason for that is because ion channels, they're incredibly complex. This graphic here shows just a little bit of it, but they can be open, they can be closed, they can be have a number of different types of subunits involved. They're very difficult to target. Saniona has been working in the ion channel space, the same core group of scientists, for more than 20 years. So they have incredible knowledge about how to target these ion channels. And we've also built up a database of more than 130,000 compounds. 20,000 of those are proprietary ion channel modulators, some of which we certainly believe we can turn into additional medicines. So this program has actually already generated 2 programs in our pipeline. One is a medicine called SAN711, and one is a medicine called SAN903. SAN711 is currently in a phase 1 clinical trial, and we believe that it may be relevant against certain rare neuropathic disorders. SAN903, we plan to move into a phase 1 clinical trial this year, and we believe that it could work against rare inflammatory and fibrotic diseases. So, and behind those, we have this huge database to pull more molecules from. So this is what our pipeline looks like today, right? You can see Testament in the 2 phase 2b trials, SAN711 in a phase 1 trial, SAN903 will move into phase 1 this year, and behind that, the whole database of compounds so that we can continue to move more assets into our pipeline. This is how Saniona is going to build a rare disease company. It's not just about bringing one product to the market. It's about bringing another and another and another behind it. I also just want to note here before I move on that having three clinical trials ongoing is incredibly exciting to us. We think it's a huge accomplishment, especially for a company of our size. It was a very ambitious undertaking. I can tell you, working closely with the team, there were hundreds of regulatory filings all across the world that have had to be made, hundreds of meetings and conversations. It's an immense amount of effort that has gone into getting these 3 trials up and running. So, summarize what we've accomplished and where we're going. 2021 was very busy for us. In addition to getting all 3 of those clinical trials up and running, we also secured orphan drug designation for Testament in both Prader-Willi syndrome and hypothalamic obesity. And I mentioned we are the first and only company to get that in hypothalamic obesity. This year is also going to continue to be exciting for us. We're expecting the top line data from our phase 1 trial of SAN 711. We'll be initiating the phase 1 trial of SAN 903. We'll be moving the next ion channel modulator into our pipeline. And we also have a number of partnerships going on with other companies. One of them is with a company in Mexico called Medix, and they're developing a product called tesofensine for general obesity. They've completed phase 3 trials there, and that is under regulatory review. We're certainly hoping for an update on that this year, and that we'll get an approval determination there. In addition to that, it's not on this list because business development deals are, they're impossible to predict the timing of because they require 2 parties. But I do want to note that we recently hired a chief business officer, and she's very much focused on looking at some of this wealth of assets that we have in our pipeline and looking at ways that we might be able to form additional partnerships to generate non-dilutive funding around those assets. And then moving into 2023, we'll have the data from the phase 2B trials. So that's going to be, of course, very exciting as well. So this is just a quick look at how we see Saniona growing over time and becoming a successful rare disease company. You can see, beginning with Tesomet for HO and PWS, many of the third-party analysts, some commissioned, some independent, they estimate that if approved, annual sales of Tesomet could reach between 850 to more than $1 billion. Then SAN 711, again, we haven't defined an indication here yet. We're still looking because there's a number of promising possibilities. But I will say one of the preclinical data sets that we have is favorable compared to benzodiazepines. That's a market that's worth well over $1 billion. SAN 903, similar story. We have a number of promising preclinical data sets, so we haven't yet selected the indication, the first indication there. But one of the preclinical data sets is in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. That's a rare disease with a market of over $2 billion. So these are significant opportunities. And like I said, behind that, the library of ion channels, life cycle management, business development. This is how we're going to build this company. So I'll just close with our investment rationale. We have 3 clinical trials ongoing. We have a deep pipeline of potential medicines coming behind that. We do have validation from multiple strategic partnerships. I talked a bit about Medix, but we also have partnerships with Novartis and Boehringer. We have funding into the second half of this year, and some of our funding comes from some of the largest and most well-respected healthcare institutional investors, including RA Capital, Pontifax, New Leaf Ventures, and others. And we see significant market opportunity for the products that we are developing. And so perhaps with that, I will stop sharing my screen and we can take some Q&A.
Thank you very much, Trista, for your presentation.
You're welcome. I hope it was helpful.
Yes. You have 3 ongoing clinical studies as we enter 2022. How many clinical studies can you run at the same time, you think?
That is a great question. I think, we're very confident with running the 3 that we have and with initiating the 4th clinical trial, which is going to be with SAN 903 and is coming this year. I think the great thing about the organization that Saniona is building is that it's scalable. We're building internal expertise around clinical development, around regulatory, around the technical operations and manufacturing portions, around compliance and quality. These are the things that you need to get an IND in the US with the FDA and to get these types of programs up and running. So I think, the way we're building this is scalable so that as we have more products, we can, build as needed to keep moving them forward. That's the vision.
Great. You plan to launch the drugs yourself instead of selling the project to a big pharma company. How do you think about that, and why do you plan to do that?
Sure. So, I think that's an important strategic question. When you think about taking a medicine like Testament, for example, and partnering it for another pharmaceutical company to launch, then you, as the innovator, you'll likely get a nice upfront payment, and you'll, likely get a stream of royalties. Those royalties, it's hard to say what they could be, maybe double digits, but it's hard to say. Every deal is different, right? But if you think that you can succeed in bringing a medicine like Testament to the market yourself, then you have 100% of the revenue that you're able to generate. And so it's really game changing in terms of the potential return to investors. And that is what we are looking to achieve. Now, there's also opportunity for partnering, because when Testament is ready, if everything goes well and we are able to get approval and bring it to the market in the US, at that time, we probably would not yet be a global organization that would be ready to commercialize in Asia or Africa or South America. And so, we may look for partners in other areas, and that would be a great source of non-dilutive financing. But in the US and probably in Europe, we're very interested in bringing our medicines to the market ourselves. That is, again, a benefit of focusing on these rare diseases, is that they tend to be treated at very few centers of excellence, and that makes the physician education and the sales and marketing efforts feasible for a smaller company like Saniona.
Okay, thank you. You have planned to list your stock in the US. How are these plans going, and what benefits do you see with this?
So we have said that we are evaluating a potential US listing, and that continues to be true. The reason for that, the potential benefit that we see is, we've had a number of conversations with various investors, not only throughout the US, but even, some in other areas of Europe, who have stated that their remit allows them to invest in a US listed company, but it doesn't allow them to invest in necessarily a Swedish listed company. And so we believe that if we could dual list, that we would be opening up an opportunity for more investors who may be interested to participate in Saniona.
But my last question will be, you will still be listed in Sweden?
Yes.
And that is the most important thing, I think, for many of our investors.
Yes. And unfortunately, I can't provide any, further details on timing. I do get that question via email a lot from folks, but we certainly will issue, as a publicly traded company, we will certainly issue press releases as soon as we have appropriate updates.
Well, thank you, Trista Morrison, for participating at the Digitala Aktiekvällen, and I wish you luck in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much.